Democratic members of the Senate Judiciary Committee are calling for ethics reforms at the Supreme Court. The committee held a hearing Tuesday after a batch of controversies involving justices surfaced earlier this year. Most prominent was Justice Clarence Thomas acknowledging he did not disclose financial ties to a billionaire Republican donor. Some committee members said more ethical clarity at the court is needed, while others said the hearing was targeted.
The fact of the matter is the American public want action. The American public is disgusted. They're disgusted with what they see in public life as the degrading of standards and conduct that would never be tolerated in their own workplaces.
And the reason is simple. The left despises Clarence Thomas. And they do not despise him because he's a conservative. The left despises Clarence Thomas because he is a conservative African-American.
The backdrop for Tuesday's hearing has been developing for years as more people see the Supreme Court as politicized. Confidence in the court has dropped sharply. In 2022, 25% of Americans said they had confidence in the Supreme Court. That's down from 36% the previous year. Scott MacFarlane joins me now for more. Scott, what arguments stood out to you from today's hearing?
One overarching argument, John, at this time when so many are concerned that democracy is fragile and democracy is at risk of becoming unbound, it was clear at this hearing today, everybody involved was concerned about the failure of credibility, the loss of credibility in the U.S. Supreme Court amid these concerns about democracy. This was a strident, at times vicious hearing with Republicans and Democrats truly going at it over this issue of Supreme Court ethics. But they really were arguing the same thing, that the Supreme Court is at risk of losing the public's trust and the public's faith. They just disagreed on why. The Democrats who staged this hearing say these allegations, this sense that Clarence Thomas is accepting gifts he shouldn't be accepting, that he is running afoul of ethical standards, is causing the loss of credibility for the court. Republicans made it unequivocal today. They believe these attacks by Democrats at these hearings are causing a loss of faith and trust in the Supreme Court. They're kind of arguing the same thing, but for much different reasons.
Chief Justice John Roberts, who cares a good deal about the court's reputation, turned down an invitation to appear at the hearing. You spoke to some members about that. Here's what they said.
None of them showed up. The Chief Justice didn't show. It seems to be a statement that you are powerless to change the Supreme Court.
No, that's not it at all. So he chose not to appear, and we are proceeding with this hearing, regardless of whether he appears or not, because the issue is one of, shouldn't the Supreme Court have a code of ethics that applies to every other judge and members of Congress?
Would you have preferred the Chief Justice show up today?
No, this is a circus.
Circus. How would it have affected the hearing, do you think, Scott, if he had shown?
Would have gave it more octane and some more wattage. I mean, this is a hearing without its star witness, which means it had the risk of being white noise on a busy day. And Democrats recognize they want to get some public pressure applied to the Supreme Court. They don't have the votes in both the Senate and the House to mandate through new law tighter ethical standards in the Supreme Court. The only weapon they have at this moment is the ability to galvanize public pressure. They had less capability of doing that today because the star witness, the would-be star witness, never appeared, and it's possible there were fewer Klieg lights and cameras because of it.
Is there anything, Scott, that might emerge in terms of that public case that moves out of the abstract and into the very concrete? In other words, what would a code of conduct for the Supreme Court look like, and is there a piece of legislation or ideas floating out there?
There are a few. One of them calls for an ethics officer, somebody to actually police this or administer this or require transparency with this. There are others that would stiffen the rules for reporting gifts and travel, for recusals from cases in which justices might have personal interests. But all of this really is fan fiction for Democrats. They don't have the votes. They don't have the House, but they do have their concerns.
Indeed. Scott MacFarlane in Washington. Thank you, Scott.